Welcome to Finance First Friday. Today we'll do our final installment on retirement accounts, and we'll answer the question, what is an IRA? An IRA is an individual retirement account. Unlike the 403B and 457B we talked about in the last 2 months, an IRA is not provided through your employer. It's something you open on your own through a bank or an investment company, like Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab. Hence the term individual. There are lots of types of IRAs, and we'll review 2 of the main types in this talk: the traditional IRA and the Roth IRA. At this point, you might well be wondering, I have access to 2 other retirement accounts, the 403B and the 457B. Why should I even think about opening another one? Don't feel overwhelmed. Let me explain to you why you should consider an IRA, perhaps even before your employer-sponsored plan. First and foremost, the IRAs you can open with an investment company like Vanguard or Schwab typically have lower fees than 403Bs and 457Bs. For example, if you opened an IRA with Vanguard and invested in an S&P 500 index fund, the price tag would be a fee of 0.04%. That's 4 cents for every $100 you invest. The same type of fund in our Voya 403B has a price of 0.26%. That's over 6 times more expensive. And while 26 cents for every $100 still sounds cheap, it will make an enormous difference in your compounded returns. We're going to look more closely at the real cost of fees next month, so stay tuned for that. It's a big one. Secondly, IRAs offer a wider range of investments for you to pick from. In a 403B or 457B, you're pretty much limited to mutual funds and annuities. In an IRA, you can also invest in individual stocks and bonds, exchange-traded funds, real estate investment trusts, certificates of deposit, treasury bonds, the list goes on. Even if you stick with only investing in mutual funds, our 403B and 457B have maybe a dozen different mutual funds to invest in. If you open an IRA with Vanguard, you can choose from over 100 different funds to create your portfolio. While you might not think you need that kind of freedom of choice at the outset of your investing journey, when you start to think a little harder about where your money is going and the implicit choices you make when you send your money to work for you, you might realize you want the freedom to move your assets around as you see fit. As a friend of mine says, you vote every day with your dollars, and investing is a big part of that. Finally, what happens when you leave employment? What if you change jobs or retire? Or what if VBCPS changes contracts again and brings in a new company to manage our 403B? Well, your IRA is separate from all of those happenings. No need to worry about rolling over old funds and filling out all the paperwork. Your funds will be right where you need them when you need them, no matter what moves you make in your job. Okay, let's get into the 2 main types of IRAs. The key difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA is when you pay taxes on the money. With a traditional IRA, you hide the money away from the government today, let it grow, and then pay taxes on the money as you withdraw it in retirement. With a Roth IRA, you pay taxes on the money today, then invest it and let it grow, and when you withdraw it in retirement, you have free income with no tax burden. We'll come back to this later for a deeper discussion on which one might be beneficial for you. The one caveat for each account is income limits. A traditional IRA may give you a tax break in the current year, but if you somehow make too much money, you'll only be able to deduct a portion or perhaps even none of your contributions. And if you make too much money, you might not be allowed to open a Roth IRA at all. Both types of IRAs have the same federal contribution limit. For 2022, the maximum amount you can contribute to either of these IRAs is $6,000 if you're under 50 and $7,000 if you're 50 or older. And with both accounts, investments grow either tax-deferred or tax-free, meaning you won't get annual tax bills to pay on the gains the way you do with interest from your savings account or the gains in your taxable brokerage account. Thinking down the road a bit, a traditional IRA comes with required minimum distributions, or RMDs, beginning at age 72. Basically, you can't hide your money from the government forever. At some point, they'll want their taxes, so you'll be forced to take a withdrawal to claim the income and pay taxes on it. A Roth IRA, however, doesn't come with this requirement. Since you've already paid taxes on the money and don't owe any further taxes, the government doesn't care how long you keep the money in your Roth IRA. This also makes it a nice way to pass tax-free money to your heirs or spouse. Just a quick note on the mechanics of IRAs. Both traditional and Roth IRAs are funded by you sending money from your bank account. This is unlike the 403b and 457b, where contributions are taken directly out of your paycheck. If you choose a traditional IRA, you won't write off the contributions until you pay the taxes next year. So, when might it make sense to use the traditional pre-tax IRA versus a post-tax Roth IRA? Honestly, you can't go wrong with either, so don't spend a lot of time agonizing over the choice. The bottom line is you need to save money. But if you're really into the game of optimizing your savings, a few considerations may make it clear that one choice is better for you than the other. By the way, this same calculus can be done for making contributions to your 403b and 457b as well, both of which have pre-tax and Roth options. Since the key difference between the two types of accounts is when you pay taxes, the key consideration about which one to open will be what will minimize your overall tax bill more. That can be a tough thing to analyze, especially since we have to compare this year's tax bill to a tax bill that might come 10 or 20 years down the road when we don't even know what the tax rates will be. There are obviously a lot of unknowns, so here are some things you might want to consider as a general guide. A traditional IRA, which maximizes your savings today by avoiding taxes today, might be more useful for you if you're someone who's nearing retirement and you either haven't started saving much or you're planning on leaving work without meeting the service requirements to draw a pension. If you're planning on relying primarily on Social Security for your retirement income, you should consider saving today with a traditional IRA. It means every dollar you earn and save is actually growing for you instead of being eaten up by taxes this year. Eligibility for tax credits is another consideration for a traditional IRA. When you lower your taxable income this year, you may make yourself eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit or the Retirement Savers Credit, saving yourself a chunk of money on your taxes. And of course, you'll invest the savings in your retirement, right? Finally, if you can look ahead just a bit and think about what your income will look like in retirement, compare it to what it is today. If you expect you're making more today than you will in retirement, which would be the value of your pension, withdrawals, other income, any required minimum distributions, etc., if you think that will be less than your gross income today, then it makes sense to pay taxes later when you know your income is lower. Roth contributions, however, are better suited for people who are already doing some steady retirement savings, especially if your savings are in the pre-tax category. If you're already saving in a 457b or 403b on a pre-tax basis, and hopefully getting that sweet employer match if you're on the VRS hybrid plan, then having some after-tax dollars available to you in retirement can give you some flexibility when it comes to paying taxes in the future. If you know you're going to retire with a pension, then that's guaranteed taxable income in the future. So it may be better to pay taxes on that money today to keep your future taxable income a bit lower. If you're early in your career, so you've got a relatively low salary compared to what you will have down the road, or if you know your income will go up in retirement because VRS and Social Security and your investment returns will lead to an influx of money, then it's likely better to pay taxes today. And finally, Roth IRAs do allow some flexibility in withdrawing the money you invest early. Although I do not recommend this strategy, you can withdraw your Roth IRA contributions before age 59.5 without penalty, which is an option that doesn't exist with a traditional IRA. So, if you're looking for the plan that gives you the most flexibility in your future, Roth contributions will likely be your better choice. So, after all that careful deliberation, I'll pose the question: why pick if you don't have to? When considering whether to open a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA, the answer can simply be yes. There is no limit to the number of IRAs you can have. Having more than one IRA allows you to have some dollars go in pre-tax and others go in post-tax. However, the annual federal limit applies to all of your IRAs as a collective. You could, for example, put $4,000 in a traditional IRA and another $2,000 in a Roth IRA, and that would reach the federal annual limit of $6,000 for people under 50. That gives you some tax savings this year, but also some money you can withdraw tax-free in the future. So why not have the best of both worlds? Now that we've covered lots of different options for you to save for retirement, it's time to make our action plan. First of all, let's consider the order in which you might want to begin filling in these retirement accounts. The more you can contribute, the better, but with all the options, it's nice to have a plan of attack. Here's my recommended list. You may not be able to do everything on the list, and don't let your inability to do one item stop you from moving on to the next one. First, if you're on the VRS hybrid plan, get yourself to that 4% voluntary contribution level so you can earn the free cash match from VBCPS. Second, if you're on the high deductible health plan and you've opted for a health savings account, fund that as much as you can. We talked about HSAs and their triple tax savings way back in October around the time of open enrollment. If you're not enrolled in an HSA or you're not making the maximum contribution you can, it's okay. Just know you can't make any changes to that until open enrollment comes back around in October. Third, get an IRA going. Traditional or Roth, you pick, but since IRAs usually have lower fees, this is the next place to stick your money, as much as you can. Fourth, the 457B. Again, pre-tax or post-tax contributions are up to you. The 457B has pretty low fees, including a flat annual fee as opposed to a percentage-based fee, making it a pretty cheap option. Plus, the 457B allows access to money before age 59.5 if you separate from your employer. Last on the list of retirement accounts is the 403B. Of all the retirement options we've discussed, this one typically has the highest fees, so that's why it's the last one I suggest. And finally, you can always take some money and put it into a non-retirement investment account that will make better long-term returns than just keeping it in a savings account. You'll end up paying some taxes on the money each year, but that's still better than watching inflation eat away your savings. If you're ready to get that savings machine up and running, then spend a little time investigating IRA products. Personally, I recommend Vanguard. They're low cost, I like their business model, and their customer service is incredibly helpful. Even when I have no idea what I'm talking about, they help me figure out what's going on and what to do about it. But there are other winners too. If you already have your money with a bank or other company that you like, check and see what products they offer. Just make sure you look closely at the fees. So, it's time to get cracking. Don't wait any longer. Time is money, and all the rest, of course. Let's go. In our next talk, we're going to dive into the awful, insidious secret life of fees, and what seemingly small costs will actually cost your retirement savings in the end. In the meantime, go do your homework and enjoy your well-deserved weekend.